You can't have connection when your body is in survival.
Lauren Zoeller's on an all-new intentional living, getting real about why our relationships fall flat.
We're all just walking around interacting with each other's wounds.
Talking about how we can better connect.
If you haven't started to look at your body from the lens of the nervous system, you're going to never be able to truly feel like you have a deep relationship to yourself. And in turn, you won't be able to have a deep relationship to someone else.
And giving us hope that true love is possible.
We have to start to work towards really coming home to being okay being alone. Because when you feel that and you know that, then you become a magnet for the people that you want to do life with.
Plus,
are you open to doing a little bit of somatic work right here on the podcast?
Sure.
Okay.
Why not? She's taking us through an impromptu somatic experience that will leave you feeling the love.
So this, Courtney, is safety. This is what it should feel like in relationship to yourself and also in relationship to other people.
And an all-new intentional living with Courtney Meyers. Before we get into the show, I've got a question. Are you in optimal health? Well, if you're anything like me, I'm sure you're just as confused and overwhelmed with all the information, rules, and advice out there for living your best life. And to make matters worse, you don't know where to turn to get some clarity.
You have to ask yourself, why is that happening?
But lucky for you, I've got someone that can help.
I made it a part of my mission. Well, I'm going to learn everything I can about health and happiness and healing and thriving and what that means to be an optimal human. And I'm going to just scream it from the rooftops.
My friend Samantha Lotus has got a new course that will break down everything you need to know to optimize your life and get your health journey back on track.
We have to move away from these rigid structures of like, you have to be this way and you have to do this way and you have to eat this and you have to follow this. And like, I don't think that's where it's at.
I know this because she has personally helped me wean off unnecessary medication. She's created a wellness kit for me so that I can optimize my own personal health goals. And she's opened my awareness to the work-life health connection.
That's where it starts.
She's so good at what she does. I know you'll be racing to sign up for her course. Just take a listen to her on episode 99 of Intentional Living, and you won't want to wait.
It's about finding what works for us and being in the trial and error and allowing it to be messy and imperfect and having a lot of grace and compassion with the journey.
Check out Optimum by Samantha Lotus. It's linked below. And if you use my special code, Courtney, you'll get $100 off the course.
It is that balance, and it's finding the right equation for you.
Don't miss out. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Lauren. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I'm so excited we get to speak today. And unfortunately, we're not in person, even though we're just down the street from one another, but we'll have to do it again sometime when your book comes out or something. But thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, I think we're going to talk about something really good because I think we are all looking for love. We are looking for love and acceptance. It's what really propels us forward. But that real love and that real acceptance, and I don't know that we all even know what that means for us, if we know how to receive it, if we know what it was. I know for me, I spent the longest time looking for it, jumping in and out of relationships, engagement, like this, that. I didn't get married till I was 37. I had my daughter. I don't know if I've even told the story in the podcast. Literally, my husband proposed to me the day I had my daughter, not on purpose. Like he proposed to me that morning and we were at dinner celebrating. And my water broke like in a movie all over this fancy restaurant. I was so swollen because she was 3 weeks early, but I was so swollen. I had flip-flops on and I was like squishing out of the restaurant. People are staring at me. It was mortifying, but like it was later in life. I was 37. I had my son at 39. We're 42 now. And it's like, for the majority of my life, I was like, when am I going to find him? And I thought that was going to be the answer to everything in my life, finding my person. But what I found out was, no, we need to learn to love. Like, I love my husband. I love my kids. That's not the thing. But like, we need to learn to love ourselves. We need to learn to heal ourselves. We need to learn to have that self-acceptance first. That's what's going to fulfill us, even though we're looking for the love. And you coach us all through that, through the healing and loving of ourselves so that we can come to a relationships and find that happiness that we're looking for. So how does that work?
Yeah. Well, first off, I love that story so much because I know the majority of the women that make their way to me, they're in their mid 30s and 40s and some of them in their 50s, and they feel like they've missed the boat. Right. And so this gives so many women hope about what is possible. And, it's funny because I wish that there was an easy way to say, okay, how do we come back to loving ourselves? Because that was a big question mark for me the majority of my life. It's like everybody preaches, okay, well, you just have to love yourself. And then when you love yourself, the right person's going to just show up. And in my case, I had thrown so much time, like 10 plus years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in therapy and in mindset work and doing everything that I thought I needed to do to find that sense of self-love. And regardless of all of the money and the time that I had invested, I still was attracting horrible partners when I would date.
Yeah.
Date was fun. It wasn't easy. And so for me, the really coming home to self-love happened when I found somatic work. I know we're going to talk about that today. But somatic work is understanding the language of your nervous system. It's understanding where in your body you choose patterns of protection over patterns of connection. And you can go to all of the talk therapy in the world. You can invest in every mindset coach out there. You can talk about your problems and say your morning affirmations and chant your mantras and do all these things that a lot of people tell you to do. But if you haven't started to look at your body from the lens of the nervous system, you're going to never be able to truly feel like you have a deep relationship to yourself. And in turn, you won't be able to have a deep relationship to someone else.
Yeah. I love that because you're right. I've said this on the show millions of times. I've been through years and years of therapy. I've had mentors. I've had coaches. I've done it all. And while I think it's wonderful, and I think we should go to therapy. My husband and I both, like I said, we met later in life. We both had lots of failed relationships. We had both gone to therapy. We know how to communicate. Like it wasn't a red flag that he had gone to therapy. It was like, thank God you had gone to therapy so that we can come to this and know how to communicate with one another. But there is a point when talking about things ceases. And we need to start taking the action. And I've just been kind of led into this world of somatics. I'm still learning about it, but it's really fascinating to me because I've always talked about how our body holds so much energy. And I didn't realize that like when we talk about our nervous system being dysregulated, it's actually more of our body dysregulation. It's not our nervous system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's protecting us. That's its job. Yet we keep talking about how do we regulate our nervous system? How do we regulate our nervous system? And we haven't really talked too much about how do we get our body to regulate so that our nervous system can settle down. And I think that's the key that we're missing.
Yeah. Well, and, just to add some clarification, your body is your nervous system, right? The nervous system is the central channel inside of your body that runs the show. So if we look at the way that we're designed as humans, right? And even as mammals in general, the most primal part of us as mammals is our nervous system. The first caveman that came into the world had a nervous system, just like a lion who was running through the Serengeti also has a nervous system. And your nervous system has two primary functions, safety and survival. And so we have been, since the beginning of time, constantly living in these two states. If someone is threatening our existence, our body is going to naturally, we call it the autonomic nervous system. I like to think of it as the automatic nervous system. Our body will automatically go into a response to keep us safe. That's what we're designed to do at a primal level. The problem is that when we've experienced things in our life, we call these trauma instances, when something is too fast, too much, or too soon for our body to properly get, let's say it goes into a survival response and it doesn't have a safe container to get to safety, what ends up happening is that our body gets stuck. in a survival response. And we end up reliving that survival response over and over and over again. And when we talk about being in healthy partnership to ourselves and to someone else, what we're talking about being in survival is that we're constantly reliving those survival responses that are innate to our bodies and to our nervous systems over and over again. And it actually keeps us from connection because you can't have connection when your body is in survival. So to just gain some clarity, like in essence, our body and our nervous system, they're one and the same. You start to think of them that way and understand how they operate.
So how do we use somatic therapy to help release these traumas and these things that are keeping us in these states where we can't connect? Because I understand exactly what you're saying. It's almost like you're like not present. You're not really there in the relationship, or you feel unsafe because you're reliving whatever patterns you grew up with. And it's not, this isn't like a blame your parents kind of thing. I'm sure I'm screwing up my kids just as well as the next. We all are. But, we grow up and our body automatically creates these systems of safety that become familiar with us from such a young age that we might not even know that we're doing it. So once we become aware, how do we start to work through it so that we can be open to connection?
Yeah. The first step is awareness, right? If you've never, I have a book that's coming out next year. It's called The Missing Language of Love. And the whole book is about understanding that your nervous system is a language. Just like you would go and learn Chinese, most of us aren't ever taught the language of our nervous system. So an example of this, we'll just go back to what some people have experienced in childhood. Let's say that you grew up and your parents told you that to not cry. And so you had big emotions, you were feeling really sad, and you had a parent that said, don't cry. You're fine, don't cry. Mm-hmm. You have this survival response that's rising up in the system. Okay. Something is happening in your body that's saying, this doesn't feel safe. It's really sad. I'm going to cry. And you have a parent who says it's not okay to cry. So the parent halts that survival response. That halting of that response then gets stuck in the body. Next thing you know, you become an adult, and let's say you get in an argument with your significant other and you start to feel that crying emerge. What do? You end up suppressing it, shutting it down, and going into freeze, which is a survival response, because that's what you learned as a child to stay safe and be accepted by your parents. We have to start to look at, okay, how can I be aware of what's actually happening inside of my body when I feel this urge to cry or be vulnerable and I want to shut it down? When we get into somatic therapy, what I'm working with as a practitioner is sitting with those responses and actually giving you space to allow the response to complete, allow the crying to come up in a way that's safe so that you can complete that protection response and get to safety. The next thing you know, 6 weeks later, you have a similar argument with your partner. You start to cry, you're vulnerable, and then boom, connection can happen because you're no longer in that breach of survival, right? So that's a little bit about how it can happen. I would say work with a somatic practitioner. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
But start to step into awareness of understanding the language of your nervous system first.
So is that what we're looking at? These traumas, because there's a lot of debate over what is considered trauma. And I strongly believe that there are more people walking this planet that are dealing with these little traumas that we don't consider traumas, because it's like, I didn't have this huge, big event happen to me that's like devastating, which is the big trauma, obviously. But so many of us are walking around with these little traumas that it's almost like we're just unsettled humans. We're dysregulated as a society because we've never actually dealt with these little things that just add up. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like we're just a bunch of 5-year-olds emotionally walking around that we don't know how to emote. We don't know how to process our feelings. And that's what we can do by doing our somatic therapy, is like learning how to process our feelings. And once we can allow that feeling to run its course, once we can allow those emotions to release, we can kind of heal those cycles of traumatic stifling or whatever it is that we grew up with. Yeah, for sure. And I also want to, hopefully this will give people a little bit of reprieve and kind of words to what you're feeling. I want to take a moment and kind of dive into trauma,
that definition that you're speaking about, because you're like, so many people aren't dealing, they don't feel like they have trauma because it wasn't a big event. If we look at trauma through a somatic lens and we look at the definition of trauma, okay, it is anything that happened. It is the stuck psychosomatic response in the nervous system to anything that happened that was too fast, too much, or too soon for the body to properly regulate and get to safety. So this means that you could have been sexually assaulted when you were 9 years old by your uncle. Okay, I know we're getting a little grin. Or you could have been the last person picked on the dodgeball team at 9 years old. And they can have the same psychosomatic response in your nervous system. They both hold the same amount of weight inside of your body. So when we know this and we look at trauma through a somatic lens, we realize that there is no one trauma that is more significant than another. So oftentimes, if you had a parent who, wasn't readily there when you were young, let's say that they worked a lot, they were emotionally detached or not really there to support you, that can cause a massive traumatic rupture inside of your system. And it may be the same rupture that your best friend feels because they were sexually assaulted by someone in their family. So there's no one trauma that is more significant. And so when you really recognize that, you can come to an understanding and this sense of peace inside of yourself that we all have trauma. Every single human on this planet has it. And if you're not doing the work to really gain awareness and step into consideration around what does this mean and how does my body respond in a moment-to-moment basis, we're all just walking around interacting with each other's wounds over and over again. And that's why somatic work is so important for everybody, not just someone that considers themselves traumatized or has experienced a big T trauma event.
Yeah. Well, and even thinking about it as you're talking, I'm thinking about my childhood growing up. I mean, my sister and I experienced relationships so incredibly different, even though we went through the same exact thing. We were in the same household. I remember sitting on the steps when my parents were having a fight, just like a normal fight, whatever. And I remember, or maybe they were mad at us because I would turn to her and I would say, Stacy, don't talk. Just let them yell at you because it makes it go by faster. And her response was always just like, jump in, put in her 2 cents. She needed it. Like, we had such different ways of dealing with things. But as the older sister, I was always trying to protect her, stay quiet, stay small. And, now looking back at the way we have formed our relationships growing up, it is so different, whether it's been a friendship or a romantic relationship. And so it's really interesting how I think these traumas are so unique to us, even as individuals in the same exact situation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's all about your adaptation response. It's all about what you needed in that moment to feel safe and to feel connection and to feel love and to feel that sense of security and belonging. And that is so different for every single person. But if we really distill it down to a granular level, it comes down to 4 survival responses. You're either in fight, flight, freeze, or you're in fawn, which is people pleasing. And so all 4 of these are still survival responses. You're still going into them. They're trauma responses. And so when we look at everyone from that lens, and we can say, oh, well, they're in the flight response, or you, in your case, you were in the fawn response. You were like, oh, stay quiet, freeze, shut down. You've got to be accepted. You've got to be liked. You've got to be loved. Maybe your sister's response was, no, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to go into fight because I want my voice to be heard. Regardless of whether you're in fight or freeze, they're still trauma responses, right? It just looks different and you adapt differently based on the way that your nervous system decided to deal with the threat at hand.
So when we're really looking for that lasting relationship and we're coming to you for help, we're just really doing this work on ourselves first. And we're creating that vacuum so that we can attract someone that has that healthy. I mean, I guess that's the question is like, are we really going to start attracting the people that are more healed or more aware at least, or more willing to go there with you?
1000%. Because if you are out in the dating world and you are dating and your baseline is in survival, Someone that comes along who's safe is going to feel boring because they're not going to give your nervous system that rush that it's used to having in survival. So I see it with my women all the time. The moment that they start to regulate their system, they get out into the dating world and they're like, oh my gosh, I am attracting totally different men. This feels really strange. It feels like I'm doing something wrong. And it's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's that their nervous system has now shifted into a baseline of safety. And so when you're in safety, you attract from safety, which is much different. And most women don't understand that.
That's fascinating. Now I'm just thinking back of my dating history because, I had a long one and I would get advice from everyone, people that were in these relationships. And then I realized later on, actually, no, maybe I am the expert in dating because I've dated longer than you, it's just my actual experience. But that is the safe people, the people you would want to end up with were the ones that were boring. And it's you just didn't want to give them the time of day. And I don't know if it's something like just being intuitive or being just in that response, your body would react. My body would react. I would just no, not dating you, next, until I finally shifted my mindset and opened it up to a vast array. I met my husband on Bumble. I opened it. I didn't say no to a date, essentially. It was to the point where I'm I'm going to just do something different. Go out with everyone and like clockwork, it happened.
Whoa.
But I opened myself up to something different. And I had been doing a lot of work on myself. So that could have been a piece of it. But but when you're in that state, the safe person that you're supposed to be with that everyone says is right on paper is boring. And that's just because your nervous system wants what's familiar, which is that excitement, that fight.
Yes. Yeah. The fight and the flight response, right? You want that sense of chaos. You want the chase. And we often think of the chase as this really exciting thing. But when you're in chasing energy, you're in flight, you're in sympathetic charge. And so if that's your baseline, you're going to seek out men that also have that as their baseline. Because I say this all the time, every relationship is a mirror. So even your relationship with your husband right now is a mirror of the work that you've done and how safe you feel inside of your own body. Both of you interact in that space. So when you start to date and you realize, all I attract are emotionally unavailable guys, men that ghost, men that don't want, they'll talk to me for 2 days and then boom, poof, they're gone. I always ask my clients, where are you ghosting yourself? Where are you not allowing yourself to be fully vulnerable? Where are you not leaning into discomfort? Because that always is the key in regards to why you're attracting what it is that you're attracting in the dating world.
That's interesting because I've always kind of thought our relationships were like us projecting onto others, but you're saying it's more of a mirroring back of what we're going through internally ourselves.
Always. Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty of being in partnership is that when you do have this mirror, it becomes a really beautiful healing container because you can see oh my gosh, where it's so funny. I was having a conversation with my girlfriend who's a somatic sex therapist before I came on the show. I'm staying at her house here in Chicago. And I just interviewed a fantastic man named Luis Mojica on my podcast. He's a somatic practitioner too. And we were talking about the fawn response, which we've talked about. And we were talking about sexual fawning, which is how many people in committed, monogamous, healthy partnership have sex for 30 years and they realize they don't actually like it. They don't actually like what their partner's doing, right? This is a form of fawning. It's a form of a survival response and kind of shutting that down. And so we were having a conversation and I was talking about, gosh, in all of my partnerships in the past, I never really felt fully sexually fulfilled. I never really felt like I had that deep. Every time that I would, bring something up that I would want something different, it would get shut down. And so I started to say to myself, but I know that this is a mirror of something that I'm not giving myself. And she said to me, she goes, well, you did go on a date this past week that you didn't want to go on. And I'm like, there it is, right? I'm constantly in that space of, okay, I'm still going to fawn. I went on this date because I felt bad about canceling. But internally, that's the fawn response saying, I need to people please. I still need to go. So I'm always looking at, okay, if this is happening in my relationships, even in the dating world or in my partnership, how is it a reflection of what I'm doing for myself internally? And when I can start to heal that, the relationship will shift always. That's how it works.
Interesting. I'm curious about if you are so desperate for love, what that reaction looks like, because I found myself in that place for a long time. And I actually had a therapist who I didn't quite connect with. And so I ended up not going through with her. But she said, like, I had a love addiction, I had a sex addiction type thing. And so I wonder what that opposite is when you're like looking for that feeling, like, what are you not giving to yourself in that space?
Yeah. So normally when someone is just obsessed with finding a partner, and what this looks like could be like swiping forever on the apps, like being on the apps, telling all of your friends, ruminating over, oh my gosh, am I ever going to find someone? There's something wrong with me.
Yes.
Right? This is what it looks like externally. What that means is that you're actually not fully connected to your relationship to yourself. You're in the flight response and you're using all of the apps and all of the, asking your friends and going on dates as a way to cope and or pacify with having to deal with that flight response that's showing up in your system. So I always tell my clients that this is you. We have to start to titrate and work towards really coming home to being okay being alone. And coming to not the place of, I'm fine, I'm good alone, right? But actually feeling that sense of groundedness and security and safe and just this deep sense of love within you. So if you think about someone in your life that you really deeply love and you love being in their presence, okay? And most people, let's say if you're not in a romantic relationship, maybe it's your mother or it's your best friend, okay? When you can start to feel, what does your body feel like when you are with that person? This becomes your litmus test. And what we want to get to is, how do you feel that same feeling that you feel with your best friend or with your mom? How do you feel that for yourself on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis? Because when you feel that and you know that, then you become a magnet for men. You become a magnet for the people that you want to do life with. But you have to get to that space of security within yourself first, or else you're just acting out of flight and you're going to attract flight.
What if you don't have that litmus test? Because I will say, I don't know that I ever did. And I know I have some deep trauma that I'm still like, that has come up for me in friendships and relationships that started in like 6th grade, 3rd grade, very young, and like best friends moving and being in like those trios of girls with the mean girl. Like I've had so many of those, and the sororities, all of that stuff happened that is just carried over and over and over into relationships that, like I've even said recently, it's like, I don't know that I've ever truly felt safe in my body. Now I finally found that with my husband. He's the first person that I don't like check. Did you text me? Did you text me? I don't, I'm not like emotionally policing him, things like that. Like this is like the first time I feel like I've been there. But like, what if you don't have that litmus test? Like, what if you don't know what that means?
Yeah. Well, are you open to doing a little bit of somatic work right here on the podcast?
Sure. Okay. Why not?
Let's try it on. And if you're listening, you can also follow along as you hear us, even though your situation may be different for someone else's nervous system. Okay. But I'm curious, even though we're here and you and I are together, I'm curious if there's anything around you as you look around that's kind of calling in your attention, or that something that feels comfortable. Is there anything around you that kind of brings that feeling of comfort to you as you look around?
Yes, my dog is lying right over there on the couch.
Perfect. Okay. Would it be okay for you to just notice your dog for a moment? And what's your dog's name?
Ellie Mae.
Ellie Mae. Oh, love that. My grandma's name is Ellie, like my person. So I want you to just take a moment to notice Ellie Mae. And I wonder, what do you notice in your body as you notice Ellie Mae?
My breathing dropped lower. into my stomach. It wasn't as shallow. And I felt like this,
Relaxed.
like a calm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does it feel okay to notice that sensation in your belly?
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to just notice it. And again, if you're following along with us as you listen, I want you to just notice the sensation there. Does that sensation have any sort of a color or a texture to it, or an image maybe?
The first thought when you said that was yellow. It felt yellow and warm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I want you to just notice, if you can, that yellow sensation in your belly.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at Ellie Mae, or if you're following along, you can look at whatever your eyes went to. And notice how you just took a deep breath. And I'm curious, as you notice that yellow color in your belly, does it want to grow at all, or can you get it to grow?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you notice that it wants to grow?
It just feels more like expansive, like it just wants to, it's from the center out. Oh, it's almost like creates like a bubble,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
around you.
Yeah. So this, Courtney, is safety.
Mm.
This is what it should feel like as your baseline in relationship to yourself, and also in relationship to other people. So notice that you didn't need somebody else to create that for you. You were able to find it by just noticing, okay, what can I orient towards that feels good? Right? And so what I tell people is, when you start to notice that you're swiping or you're constantly checking your texts, be like, wait a second, this is not a good thing. I need to break this. What can I orient to right now that I know just feels a little comfortable? And can I just be with that thing instead for a moment? Now, this is a tiny little exercise. When you work with me as a practitioner, we're constantly working with these responses in your body to give it space. But when we say, like, I didn't have any sort of healthy relationship. Yeah, but you have had healthy relationships to something. Maybe it's your favorite cup of tea, or your dog, or your cat, right? That's where you start to build that relationship inside of your body.
I love that. And I love that my healthy relationship, or that feeling, was my dog, because I got her specifically for that purpose. I adopted her because it was like, I just want to feel that unconditional love. It was after a breakup. My little sister just got engaged. It was just like a really hard time. And I've said this before on the podcast, she saved me.
Yeah.
She is the one that gave me purpose and hope and love. And so, I mean, it was so natural to say that, especially because she's in the room with me right now. But that is amazing how we can bring that love in other forms. It doesn't have to be seeking others, because I know I became hyper independent, overly independent, because I didn't need anyone. Where really, like you said, if you're being a mirror to your relationship, I did.
Yeah.
We need people. We need to have community. We need to have relationships, but we can close ourselves off so much if we aren't finding it to being like, I don't need anyone. I have a lot of girlfriends like that, especially as we get older.
Yeah.
In our 40s, and you haven't found love. It's like, I don't need it.
Right. Well, and you hit on something really important. We as humans, we are designed for connection. Connection's important. And and I see this with successful, high achieving women all the time, they start to achieve. And what we do when we achieve and we try to mask with success is that we're actually shutting down connection. So when you're in this hyper state of being in high achievement, you have no connection to self. You're not actually honoring and slowing down enough to honor what you need. And so then successful women are like, why can't I find a partner? I'm like, because you're not connected to yourself. You have no connection, and you have to be open and receptive in order to call a partner in. Right. So it's like, that's where you start to ask yourself the deeper questions. Like you just said, you got the puppy to show you, got Ellie Mae to show you that deep sense of unconditional love. But really what the dog did was it reconnected you back to your sense of connection to self so that you could be open to receive your partner.
So when we are those high achieving women, it's not that we're just so in our masculine, because I feel like that is talked about a lot, that we're just so in our masculine that we're not going to attract that support, that love that we want. It's more that we're just disconnected from self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because if you go into your masculine, it is a survival response. It's a survival response. When you are in the space of not feeling seen, protected, and supported, you have to protect and support and be seen to survive. So what do? We go into flight, we disassociate and shut down our feelings because we've got to get the job done. And that, if not handled properly, can become a massive trauma response. So there is a lot of buzz around masculine, feminine, but if we look underneath the hood, even underneath masculine, feminine, what we're talking about is someone being out of safety. That's why it's so hard for someone to find partnership.
So I'm curious on this nervous system work, is this dysregulation what is causing so many mental health issues these days?
1000%. Yeah. I mean, here's the beautiful thing. This somatic work is making its way into mainstream, and it hasn't been mainstream for a long time. But our traditional society, Western society, is, oh, this doesn't feel good. Let me give you an antidepressant. Let me give you an anti-anxiety med to numb the pain. Because we're numbing a symptom and we're not getting to the root cause. Nervous work gets to the root cause. Because if someone is dealing with hyper bouts of depression, they're in freeze. If someone's dealing with hyper bouts of anxiety, they're in fight flight. And when we give someone a medication to numb it, and again, I'm not anti-medication because I do think that we need medication sometimes to be able to get to a somatic therapist and work through some of these root cause issues. Okay. But when we're using medication for the rest of our lives to try to mask a root cause, it's a problem. And so 1000%, this is why we have such a mental health crisis. We're treating symptoms and not root causes.
I love that you said that, because I am on anti-anxiety medicine for ruminating thoughts, OCD thoughts, high anxiety. Yeah. It's a very low dose, but I don't think I've been on it for years now. I don't want to be on it for years, but I know that there is a better way. I don't think as a society, we should just be numbing ourselves, taking pills. We do not treat root causes. And I have major issues with the way the Western world treats things. I think there are wonderful holistic health practitioners out there, and there is a trend towards that. But let's start looking at the root causes. What are we eating? How are we feeling? How are we sleeping? All these other things. But it's a heavy lift, especially for someone like me that's been on it. I know I can't just stop. So how do we go there? Does somatic work help you ease off of it?
Yes, I have so many of my clients who are no longer on anti-anxiety or anti-depression medication. But I will say this, okay? I'm not a medical practitioner. We have to say this for disclaiming purposes.
Yep.
Do not just take yourself off of it cold turkey. Yeah. That is not the way to go. You need to work with the somatic practitioner to start to titrate yourself off of the medication. Because if your nervous system has been using something to suppress it for so long, the moment you remove that, it's going to blow your nervous system past its window of tolerance. So it's really important that you work with a somatic practitioner to help you titrate off of your medication, and also know, is it the right time? Is it the right time to fully come off of it? So to answer your question, I have so many clients that no longer need their depression and anti-anxiety medication any longer after doing somatic work, but you want to make sure that you are not just quitting cold turkey and that you have support as you do it.
Well, and I wonder if prolonged use of medications such as that, if that dims our connection to self, because like you said, we're numbing it. We're numbing ourselves out. And okay, let's say it's not your Zoloft. Let's say it's wine at the end of the day, or weed, or whatever, whatever food, binge watching TV, whatever it is. I feel like we are so prone to just go numb ourselves out because we don't want to do the work to feel, because we don't want to do the work to heal.
Right.
And that's where like we want the easy button and we've been told we can have it. But that's just making us so disconnected from ourselves, what is available to us, from our intuition, from our happiness, from our spirit, from any sort of joy. Yes, we might have to feel the hard with it, but then we can also feel that ecstatic joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you have to remember that the only way out is through. So if you are dealing with depression, what's underneath depression is usually a lot of grief and a lot of sadness and a lot of anger. It's so deep, depression is. And yeah, you can take a pill to numb it. That's the easy way. But eventually that pill is going to quit working and you're going to need to increase the dosage. And next thing you know, like, and every time you have to remember that with every medication you take, there is always a side effect.
Yeah.
So you can't take a medication and just expect nothing else to happen inside of your body. It always has a trickle down effect. And our bodies are so brilliantly designed to heal themselves.
Yes.
They are. But we often forget that. We think that we need medication in order to intervene with all of it. And the truth is, if you just look at your nervous system and you get your body back to safety, which is its most innate form, it's what it wants to be in, all of these things that you're dealing with, your hormonal issues, your digestion issues, your immunity issues, it will all clear up because your nervous system is no longer in survival. It's in safety. So depression, we've got to feel all of the grief. We have to feel all of the loneliness. We have to feel all the sadness and all of the pain to get to the other side. But every emotion, every sensation has a very short lifespan. So we just have to be able to feel it fully in order to renegotiate it in the system.
Yeah. We forget about that. And we just like reach for the easy way out. And it doesn't make sense to me that any of us would walk around thinking, let's just put these synthetic things into our system constantly and think that we're just going to be okay. Now, there are great things about modern medicine, like surgery. There are great things saving lives. But anytime we're introducing something that we have to have on a daily basis for the rest of our lives, I question its validity. Doesn't mean I haven't done it.
Yeah.
But is that the right thing? And what should we do? And where should we go from here? Because we can't erase our past. But how do we move forward in a healthier way so that we can create a more sustainable society of people that are stable, that have regulated nervous systems, and that we can build these relationships that we want?
Right, right. And it's, again, there is a time and a place for medication. There really is. If someone has experienced something extremely traumatic, like I worked with a lot of the parents that, were victims of the shootings that happened in Nashville a few years ago. And they needed medication. What they saw and what some of them experienced was extremely traumatic. And we needed the medication to get through it. But they're not on it anymore, right? You taper off of it because you allow it to help you work through what's showing up in your system. But it's not meant to be on for the rest of your life. It really isn't.
So how do we work with you if we want to find love, if we want to deepen our connection to self, all the stuff we've been speaking about?
Yeah. So you can find me. I'm most active on Instagram at Lauren Zoeller. I also have a website that is laurenzoeller.com. So go check out my website, and all of my stuff is going to be on the website. I have a new app that's launching in June. So if you want more information on somatics and somatic experiencing and what it looks like to be in relationship or dating from the lens of a somatic world, come join my app. But those are really the places that you can find me. So you can find me, everything that you need is on either my Instagram, on my website, or again, on my app, if you decide to download it and consume some content there.
I love it. Thank you so much. I love this conversation, and I know we can just go so much deeper. I feel like we just scratched the surface. So we'll have to have you back when your book comes out.
Yes. Thank you so much, Courtney. It was a lot of fun.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Lauren Zoeller, for the beautiful and expansive conversation about healing our nervous system, reconnecting to ourselves, and opening ourselves up to the relationships we truly desire. If you want to work with Lauren, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have going on. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.